back to the AFL High Performance Podcast. My name is Jack McLean. I'm your host, and today I'm lucky enough to have Tim Mosey as our guest. Our topic for today's chat will be all around building elite performance in strength and conditioning. If you're tuning in live, feel free to send in your questions. But welcome, Tim. Thanks for jumping on, mate. Really looking forward to our chat.
Thanks, Jack. Yeah, thanks for having me on. Looking forward to having a chat about a few things, mate. It'd be good.
Chat shop, absolutely. And for those, no doubt, the S&C's listening in, mate, especially Australia bound, would be aware of your background. But for those tuning in that aren't about, aware of your background, mate, do you mind sort of providing a bit of a, intro into where the passion started for high performance for you, as well as the different sort of work experiences you've done along the way?
Sure. I've always, I guess, like a lot of probably performance guys or S&C guys, been into sport, played it all my life. Always interested in the training component and side of things. Always interested in about the performance side of things since I was younger, going into university and then obviously moving on into the working world. I started my full-time S&C career in 2009, the Tasmanian Institute of Sport, and from there I've moved on to successive roles in high school at Brisbane Boys College. Spent 5 years there, then moved on to Queensland Academy of Sport. Spent 5 years working there, and then moved on to New South Wales Waratahs after that. I spent the last 4 years working for the organisation down here in Sydney. It's a funny one, mate. I've always wanted to be an S&C coach. It's just the only thing I've ever wanted to do since I got into my working career. There's been a lot of points along the way where I've sat down and looked in the mirror and thought, is this where I want to go and what I want to do? And there's never been any point where I've actually wanted to do anything different. So I guess it can be a good thing and a curse in itself, because I'm sort of down the path that I am now for the amount of time I've been doing it. And I'm sure there's some guys in the industry who can appreciate that. You go all in on it, and yeah, it's just what I do. It's a funny one when I think about wanting to potentially move out of it or do other stuff. It's kind of a bit of my identity now. So yeah, I've always loved it, always been interested in it. It doesn't get any easier the longer you go in it. But yeah, it's certainly been a good last sort of 15 years. Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic, mate. Yeah, thanks for sharing that insight. When you say you've always had a passion for it, is that something that was there an S&C that perhaps was your first strength and conditioning coach, where you saw them sort of go about their craft and you thought, oh, that looks like a pretty cool job, or was it something that evolved with your own experience? Like, talk us through.
Nah, mate, it's before that. It's before that. I was 11, and I was watching. We were at a training camp before a national titles in athletics. And I was part of the Queensland team, and we're down at QE2, and there was a guy out on the track, and he was training one of the female sprinters, ball guy, and he's oiled up. He's out there without his shirt on. He's carrying on with the athletes that he's got. And I just remember watching him going, man, that's a job. That's awesome. What's that? Who's that guy? What's he do? And it just really caught my imagination. It was Kelvin Giles, and
wow.
it was way back.
They'll do that.
It was way back when he was actually on the deck coaching. So I vividly remember that. I was a kid. I was literally a kid. I was in primary school. So that sort of is an initial one from when I was younger. And then as I got older and played more sport and played a lot of rugby at school and played after school, and I guess the S&C coaches that probably had an influence on me when I was playing and before I started. Tony Wilson was one when I was involved with some academy stuff back in the day at the Queensland Reds. And then there was another guy in there, same thing. I used to watch him coach another group of players, and he'd get in there and he'd work with them on their cleans and their Olympic lifts, and he'd be running around the field with the props. Another, I don't know if it's the hair thing, but another guy didn't have any hair. It was Dean Benton at the time, working with some of the ARU based players who were in the facility as well. So I remember that, and just watching them as they worked, and they certainly had an influence on me before I started my career. And then as I got through uni, got some work at Acceleration Australia. So Stewie Briggs had a big influence on me early doors when I was really green, just literally coming out of university. So those sort of guys in the initial stages before I sort of kicked off my professional working career. Pete Culhane was a big influence. He was my first boss at the Tasmanian Institute of Sport. I guess then as you sort of progress and you meet people in the industry, and I got a lot and gained a lot of some of the guys who are of similar level and age to me in the industry, and who I felt comfortable sitting down and talking with multiple areas a lot of the time. Some of those guys, John Hood, who's worked with me at Brisbane Boys College, he's moved on to the United States Sevens program for a while. Jake Jennings, Harry Westbrook, they're guys who I've worked with in the past, and Will Brown as well at the Reds, who I've had a long association with, and they're the kind of guys who I still keep in touch with today, and they're sort of pretty tight in my professional circle, and I sort of go to those guys a lot for advice and vice versa. So they're probably the big ones, mate. Johnny Mitchell gave me a fair bit of guidance early doors through the ASCA, and a lot of time. He'd give me a lot of time and advice when I asked for it. Again, early doors, so I owe a lot to him as well. Yeah.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's a cool story to hear about, like Dean Benton, Kelvin Giles. I imagine that you're not the only one that has started S&C because of those two. There'd be a fair crowd there, but
Yeah, big influence, right? Like just a lot of sort of the original guys in the country, like 20, 30, 15, 10, 20 years ago kind of thing. So yeah, certainly yeah, just yeah, big sort of big positions in the industry. Yeah.
100%. And what about highlights, mate? On a more personal note, moments of your career that you're sort of proud of, and just spring front of mind when you're.
Yeah, there's a couple, Jack. I think it's funny that they're probably professional experiences that I had early on when I was starting out. A couple come to mind: the 2009 World Rowing Championships. I think they're in Poland. I worked with a heavyweight quad leading to that. They'd just come off the back of Beijing Olympics, and were going into the 2009 World Champs. They finished second in that race. I remember watching the live stream from my parents' computer room out in Daybra on a granularly Wi-Fi that was really quite average, and they finished second, came over the top of the third place crew, and it was a tight race. It was less than a second. Working with those guys, I had Dave Crawshay on the boat. He's the gold medalist in the pair from the year before with Scott Brennan. That was quite an experience working with some really high quality athletes. The following year, the 2010 Rowing World Champs, again, I worked with the Lighty Four in that, and they finished second by 700ths of a second. So in rowing, that's literally the bow ball of the boat. So literally about that much of the boat that they finished second by. I just remember watching that race and with the staff at the TIS at the time, and yeah, it was a bittersweet moment. They sort of just got pipped, and it was a great race. So I remember that, and that was sort of early doors. More recent, I was probably 5 years ago, working with the Australian archery team, qualifying for the Tokyo Olympics. We had the 2019 World Champs in the Netherlands, and in a team event, we were playing Turkey. Turkey had who would go on to be the individual gold medalist in Tokyo, Meta Gazos, and he was quite good. Turkey got up 4-0. I won't go into the scoring aspect of archery too quickly, but Turkey got up 4 points to nil. We had to win the next three I guess, heats to get through. So we need to win, and then at least get a draw to get the last point. And we got back to, I think it was 4-4, and I was standing at the back of the range. And I was actually standing next to the Turkish coaches, and they were going nuts. They're going, "Yeah, we're up" in Turkish. I'm not sure what they were saying, but they were getting really excited because they were up 4-0. Anyway, our boys came back to level it at 4-4. We ended up going to a shoot-off arrow, and we got it. We shot the closest to the middle of the target, and we won that match, and that qualified us for the 2020 games. So if Turkey won it, they were going, and if we won it, we were going. So I just remember that vividly. I was standing out the back. There's no one around except these Turkish blokes, and the disappointment on their face after they'd been ahead, and then I sort of went past, shook their hand, and they didn't want to. They didn't want to talk to me, and then ran inside and celebrated with the team. Was that stood out in my mind as well. So that was quite a good moment, good nice professional moment. Yeah.
Yeah, it was just yourself, the Australian representatives with them in there.
Literally. It was me standing
Yeah,
at the back with the Turkish side, and yeah, they were smoking and everything. It was quite funny, but yeah, it was a good day.
yeah, I love that. Thanks, mate. That's yeah, it's a great story. And then obviously flip side, mate, professional sport, like you said, when you've been in for 15 years, there's the highs, but there's also the pressure, high pressure moments on a pretty much on a daily basis, really. But what have been the most significant challenges that you faced over your career, and how did you learn or how did you grow as a coach facing those challenges?
Yeah, I've had probably. I would consider it fortunate to work across a multitude of sports in my career, through the Olympic system, at high school, and then specifically with rugby for the past 4 or 5 years. With that comes a range of coaches, a range of support staff, a range of parents, teachers with their own aspects, their own thoughts, their own opinions, on everything, on S&C, on sport, on what kids should do, on what professional athletes should do. I've worked with coaches from China. I've worked with coaches from Taiwan. Might be the same now. Russia. So coaches from all around the world with English as a second language. So I feel like over that period of time, I've been able to develop my ability to have a good understanding of what other coaches want, and what aspects of sport I'm not really across. So they've been sort of challenges that I've been able to get through in the past sort of 10, 15 years. Early doors, when I started off, I was pretty excited and keen and up and about to want to make change, change the way things are done, imprint my opinion on a program, on the way that things should be run. I think over time, I've certainly been able to sit back, and get a better understanding of other people's aspects, other people's thoughts and processes, and try and align myself with different ways of doing things. I think that's a big challenge, particularly for a support staff coach or an assistant coach or a teacher or someone that's not necessarily running a program or the head of a program, is to work with staff on the same level as you. Work with players who've got different opinions. Work with players and athletes who've been involved with the sport for longer than you. So archery, for example, working with the archers in the Australian team, they've been shooting for 20 years. I've come across from working with high school kids and rowers for 5 or 6 years. So getting out on the range, trying to draw a bow, I can't even draw the bow back. It's so things like that. Transferring into rugby in the past 5 years, I have a better understanding and appreciation for it, having played it for a period of time. So there's a different component to that. but yeah, it's certainly given me a better understanding and appreciation for um, the wider aspects and nuances to different sports, and how people go about it, across the board: head coach, assistant coach, logistics manager, etc. So I reckon that's probably one that they've been the biggest challenges that I've sort of managed to navigate through, I think, professionally. Yeah.
Yeah, it's probably one of the more unique situations that we face as S&E coaches as you progress in your career and you do become that. I guess you find yourself in environments where you haven't played the sport yourself, or you've never worked in the sport yourself, but you're a professional coach, so you're at that level where you're full time and you're getting these gigs and you're working in an environment that, like you said, there's athletes in there that have been playing that for 20 years, and you're employed full time to help them. So it's finding a position on where do you sort of sit in that, in that situation where they're clearly a pro at what they do and they've been doing it their whole life, but there's also a skill set that you can bring that can complement them to thrive. Do you feel like working, like in sports, where you, like yourself, if you've played it, do you grow more as a coach in environments where it's completely all new?
Yeah, I think so. I don't necessarily think you need to have played the sport you're working with. It gives you an understanding of it. I think that you probably need to have trained as an S&C coach in the gym, experienced what it's like to, have so much lactate in your legs that you almost vomit. Lift some heavy stuff that you need to fail on. I think they're important aspects to S&C coaching, and being able to understand that, and a willingness and an openness in sports that you have no idea about, to just sit back and go, how am I gonna learn here? I spent so much time sitting on an archery range, sitting in a tinny down the Franklin River in Tasmania in winter with 6 layers of clothing on and 3 pairs of gloves, because I didn't bring enough warm clothing. I had to wear all the coaches' stuff at 5 o'clock in the morning, sitting on the side of a pool with the Russian water polo coach, trying to understand the rules to the game. They're the experiences I remember, and they hold you in good stead as you move forward. And the flip side to that is you bring a skill set and an understanding of training and what's needed and required to get strength adaptation, to get improvements in speed, to get improvements in aerobic capacity, which are important, and of high importance in all sports. You could argue all sports. So it's a flip side, is that coaches from other sports that aren't across those aspects understand and learn from guys like us, from S&Cs like us. So it's a two-way street, but it usually sits in our realm to be open and willing and to want to sit down and listen and learn. For sports that you haven't worked with, it's the hardest part. But yeah, spending time in the environment with players, spending time in the environment with coaching staff, and understanding on the pool deck, in the boat, on the side of the field, that's probably where you get your most improvement, your most understanding from, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. That's sound advice, mate. Thanks for sharing that. And no doubt S&C's hopefully writing down some gems there that have already started in the intro. But going back to just a few tips. So go back to your sort of career journey, mate. How many years of semi-pro community sort of sport did you put in before that first contract?
My first full-time contract, 2009. I think I spent maybe 3 or 4 years before that, at the back end of my undergrad degree, and then working in sort of that semi-pro or community type sporting level, and paid roles as well as volunteer roles. So across that 3 or 4 years, still putting time into places where I wasn't getting paid to get experience. So yeah, it might have been 4 years before my first full-time contract. Yeah.
Yeah. It sounded like you completed your bachelor's, you had that 3-4 years under you, and then you got that full-time contract. Did you do further study, like a master's or?
Yeah, I did. Yeah,
Um,
I did the ECU masters maybe 12 months after I finished my undergrad degree. So by the time I started my first full-time contract, I think I had maybe a semester left on the ECU masters. And yeah, I've done Bachelor of Applied Science in Human Movement Studies. That's what it was called back when I was doing it. And then yeah, that Master of Exercise Science through Edith Cohen. I think I was maybe the second or third intake of that when Mike McWigan was running it, and Anthony Blazevich, I think, as well. Yeah.
what about you've had a lot of strong influences that you've mentioned that have helped shape your philosophy from a strength and conditioning sort of technique skills perspective. Did you have a mentor, if you like, that helped you sort of land these full-time gigs and sort of shaped which course to do and sort of that developmental stage, or was that more going off gut feel yourself and driven by yourself?
A bit of both, yeah. It's probably sort of bouncing off a few guys over the years. Initially, it was probably through the ASA with John Mitchell, and his connection when he was at the AES, and being in the SysAS network. Guys like Pete Culhane, particularly early on, got him in the direction of either further study or extra work with different sports. Probably as I moved through into high school and into pro sport. Again, it was probably guys who were around me a little bit more. We'd sort of look at maybe our gaps and what we wanted to do and bounce off each other a little bit more than sort of a longer term mentor. It's probably guys in my immediate circle who I mentioned before, yeah.
And with what you know now, is there anything you'd do differently or any advice you give to Tim Mosey coming out over a decade ago? Anything you'd do different? In obviously hindsight's a beautiful thing, but I guess for the developing coaches that are in that position at the moment, what are some of the key areas do you think to focus on, not just to get your full-time contract, but actually to contribute and have a lasting career?
Yeah. Whatever you're doing at that current point in time, do it to the best of your ability. Don't worry about anything else. Don't worry about what you're going to do next. Don't worry about what you've done in the past. Just wherever you are, do your best work where you currently are. Things happen. Things take time. If you're involved with strength and conditioning and you do it as a lifelong career, there's a lot of time between when you start and when you finish. So with an understanding of that, I would have told myself back when I first started, just take your time, smell the roses along the way for a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great advice, mate. That definitely resonates. I'll probably say a similar thing. Like you said, you don't know that at the time. You think, it's sort of, you're in a rush, when you're at that sort of stage in your career, you're trying to maximize everything and spread yourself thin and get as much experience as you can, but quality, the cream definitely rises to the top, doesn't it, and stands out.
Yeah, I think back to when I was younger and wanting to change things and leave a mark or have influence. Things take time, and you get a really long-lasting career if you just spend time doing what you're doing really well. I've tried to spend a lot of time developing my craft and my roles along the way. So 5 years at BBC, 5 years at QAS, nearly into my fifth year. I feel like time spent in the saddle in roles certainly gives you the ability to develop yourself and develop the program around you. And it certainly takes time. I remember trying to implement the athlete development program at school, BBC, and it literally took us 3 years. It was a year of planning, the strategy, what we were going to do, looking at where we could implement things. Second year, trying to implement stuff, and then the third year, pretty much implementing bits and pieces. So, stuff takes time.
It's good segue, mate, for the topic that you chose, building elite performance. For a strength and conditioning perspective, I guess take us to the start when you've been in a position where you have worked in a number of different environments and cultures. What's sort of the first phase of your approach when you're in a new environment? How do you sort of go about it?
Yeah, getting to understand the sport and the players and the staff that you're working with first and foremost. Certainly with the different sports I've worked with in the past, getting an understanding of your co-workers, getting an understanding of, it can be as simple as getting an understanding of the rules of the sport you're working with, understanding the nuances within the sport, and then understanding what's critical to performance and what's noise, and trying to differentiate between the two, because there's certainly a lot of noise that we tend to worry about in S&C, I think. So I think they're the initial key aspects. If you consider it, I guess from a rugby perspective, contact sport, rugby league, maybe a similar type S&C approach, AFL less so. But the nuances in rugby, certainly around positional demands of the game, high level of impacts in the game, the differences in body size and shape at school level, but also up through into the professional ranks, getting an understanding of where you need to look at from a programming perspective in those from those aspects for rugby is probably an initial starting point, yeah.
And I guess from like you mentioned that contact side, is that something that you would work with the coaches on in terms of a vision perspective? Is it more whiteboard sort of sessions? Like, what's the process look like? Early days when you're trying to build that integration and further understanding of the sport.
Yeah, it's sitting down in meeting rooms with coaches and support staff, and getting understanding of across the weekly training program how we can layer in different aspects to the program, whether it's training on the field that's going to involve contact. Where does that sit in the training week compared to, for example, a heavy lower body session? Where does that sit in terms of in relation to a units-based session? So whether it's a forwards unit session or a backs unit session, and then trying to come up across the week where you can get your best bang for buck in terms of intensity across different parts of the day, what your focus is for a day, whether it's an extensive based session, for example, or an intensive based session. So whether it's a conditioning games based day, or whether it's a pure conditioning based day, whether it's a skill based day, with minimal sort of conditioning aspects to it, and trying to come up with the best sort of strategy across the week to maximize what you want to get out of each day, and then layering in them across the week, and layering in week to week, and how you're going to progress through those sort of different stages, particularly through a pre-season as an example. One of the challenges with rugby is that you need to spend time in scrums, spend time in lineouts. The way the game goes at the moment, we spend a lot of time in the maul situation, which is high intensity, high level of contact, and with that you get increased injury risk as well. So how across a pre-season you can implement that, and then how across, I guess, the in-season as well, you can maximize your work there and try and minimize injury risk as well. So you got obviously guys on the park ready to play week to week. So they're probably the initial planning stages. And as an S&C, or if you're running the program as a head of performance, you're suggesting things to the coach, and with the coach, at the end of the day, the head coach has the overriding say in how he wants to work training. So sometimes you got to go with what they want to do. So It's being able to have those conversations, map stuff out, think about things, and go with what the head coach wants to do.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, mate. I think for those that haven't worked perhaps in rugby or in full-time sport yet, um, take us through some experiences that you've had where maybe there's some, obviously areas that you've got to be flexible with and to support the head coach, but also areas like you alluded to before where this is an area that you've got a skill set in and an education in that you're almost your non-negotiables, whether it be speed and where that sits in with the week,
Yeah.
and things like that. What would be, I guess, your key areas that are sort of non-negotiable when they sit in, but are there areas that perhaps in the past you have like, yeah, okay, we can be flexible there, because the coach has done that. That's their philosophy. They're coming into the program. We want to support them with that aspect.
One of the big ones is, particularly when you're thinking about from a rugby perspective, is I guess trying to maximize lower body strength and where your lower body strength sessions sit in relation to scrum and maul sessions. So trying to divvy up across the week when we can focus on spending time in the weight room where blokes are going to squat. Might be 4 sets of 8, 4 sets of 10. They got high level fatigue in their legs. Don't want them to go out there and trying to pack scrums on fatigued legs, where you want high intensity and high levels of contact. So that's one in the weekly training program that we juggle about. Speed in relation to strength sessions, in relation to an intensive or an extensive session. There are other ones that we sort of discuss. In the past, we've done our speed work at the back end of training, which might be a bit of a question from some S&Cs or as to why you do that. And our thinking there was that guys have gone through 60 minutes of work, and they're warm, so they're actually at a lower risk of potentially doing an injury if they're going into a high speed effort or a max speed effort when they potentially aren't warm enough at the start of a session. So a rationale to some of the speed work we've done has been at the back end of a training session rather than as the traditional speed warm up with a couple of efforts before you go into training, which tends to be a strategy for a lot of teams or sports to do that. That's something that we may adapt and shift a little bit this year, but in the past that's been something that we've looked at and we've had pretty good success with. The big ones are around your contact levels. When you have your contact levels across the week, and we run a 2 on 1 off 2 on training week. So we'll train Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, recovery day, Thursday, Friday, training days. And so where we put contact in the week there, usually we might look at a Tuesday where they got a day off to recover into the Thursday session and the Friday session. And again, have contact-based work on the Friday where they get the weekend to recover from. So that's how we sort of divvy up across the week. The sort of key aspects of the program that we need to get a lot of high intensity and high quality work in, but at the same time they require a fair bit of recovery time, and they're also high risk in the training environment from an injury perspective. So we want to give our guys the best opportunity to train intensely, train hard, but then recover well as well. So it's trying to maximize the training week around those sort of aspects to the program. From an S&C perspective, you just give and take a little bit in those areas. So we might take a little bit of the gym workout as we get towards games starting next year, a little bit of the volume and a bit of the intensity out for a little bit more, say, explosive based work or plyometric based work with less sort of intensity on the bar in favor of speed, barbell speed, and that may diminish some of the lower body fatigue that guys accumulate from a decent lower body strength training session. As we put a fair bit of work in the guys in the gym, and the level of recovery they need from that's quite high. So earlier on in the preseason, we might do a bit more high volume work, and as we progress towards games and progress towards a higher level of contact intensity through the preseason, uh, the strength program will reflect a change in that as well. So your traditional approach to block sort of periodization may not work as specifically well with some of the stuff we do. We might have to change week to week, rather than have a really strong, heavy block or 4 to 6 weeks, something like that. We may need to change week to week depending on what some of the work on the field is. So it's being able to do that, be comfortable enough to do it from a strength perspective. Yeah, I think that's sort of some of the nuance to the training week in rugby. Yeah.
Yeah, it's great context, mate, and you can see the process that you and your team go through to, I guess, navigate that, which can be challenging with what the supporting the skill and the tactical, but also getting adaptation. Throughout a pre-season when you've got turnover list and new players, have you had situations where players aren't coping perhaps with the main group program and you have to individualize, or and that might be an injury, or it might be the adverse where they're just simply not, they're well behind. Their strength is just nowhere near the level and they need more work.
Yeah.
And how do you sort of bring that to the coaches that we might need to sacrifice a short-term skill aspect for more work and pushing them harder in the gym or on the field from a physical capacity point of view?
Yeah, we bucket our players, for lack of a better term, guys that need to lose body weight, body comp guys that need to get bigger, guys that probably need to work on more explosivity, something like that. So in the past, we've run additional strength sessions for guys that need it, or body comp based sessions for guys that need it in certain parts of the season. The challenge for that has always been that it can't detract from training on the field. So we still need all our guys to get as much work as they can on the field, and that's not necessarily work from needing work or fitness perspective, but it's a lot of learning perspective. So if coaches have got work on the field that they need players out there learning plays, learning phase shape, learning where they need to be at certain parts in certain periods of time on the field, that needs to be a priority across the year. So if guys need to get bigger, need to get fitter, need to get stronger, our program needs to fit around the main shell of what guys need to do on the field. And that's, I would suggest, there's a higher learning component in a lot of the work that we do from potentially other sports. So guys need to be out in the field as much as they can. We've got younger guys who come into the program from either club level or from academy levels that just physically, and it's a training age thing. It's nothing else. They're exceptional at the sport, but they've trained for a couple of years rather than 4 or 5 years as a professional. So we adapt their program across a week. It might be something as simple as if we've got a few young front rowers, they might share reps in and out on the field as we're going through plays. So they might do a set out in the field, come off, swap with someone else, and we try and manage workload that way a little bit. They might need to jump back in the weight room after training's finished, do an additional watt bike or do an additional push pull, a couple of sets to failure, something like that, if they need to improve body comp in some aspect, whether putting on weight or losing weight. So sharing reps is a big one. If we've got enough players, when you start to get an injury list, and then your injured list grows, you've got less players available to go onto the field. So ideally, you've got a short injury list, and you've got more guys available to train and share reps if they need to, particularly around guys that need load management. There's some of the strategies we use, yeah.
And looping back to the speed change in philosophy, take us through, I guess, that decision-making process with the team. The traditional approach, like you mentioned, doing speed early. It might be 20 minutes into a session after an extensive warm up, and then they hit some speed, and then they're off and into the footy program. But you chose to make a change and do it later on. And was that due to player feedback? They didn't feel warm enough? Was it due to a few injuries? Talk us through why that change sort of came
Yeah,
about.
we reviewed the 22 season, the 23 season, and found that we wanted to reduce our time on feet a little bit more in terms of the training day. And so one of the things that we looked at was the time spent warming up, the time spent before a session, getting ready to sprint, and then doing speed work at the start of the training session. And we sort of realised that there were ways that we could alter the training week to minimise time on feet, reduce the length of training sessions, and then also reduce a total length of session in terms of total volume, high speed running, etc. So one of the strategies we used for that was to integrate our speed into the back end of training once they'd completed all the work that they needed to do with the coaching staff. So it was a strategy based around a review process and a feedback process, both from playing group and from the coaching staff. Got a new coaching group and a new performance staff this year, so they bring with them different philosophies and approaches to training, and so we're taking a different approach this year from that aspect. New philosophy, new direction from a new head of performance. So you roll with that, and we do things a bit differently. There's so many ways you can do stuff, Jack. That's not. Everyone thinks about a textbook way of doing things or what you learn at uni that it's right or wrong, and there isn't a right or wrong way to do anything. There are better or potentially worse ways to do things, but if you've got a good understanding of why you're doing something, and you can rationalize it and explain your thinking about how you want to do it and why you want to do it, and I think it's all good. Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, it's like what sort of been a big theme of I guess your message, mate, is that how all the systems work together towards the same goal. And yeah, like you said, there's many ways to do it, but as long as everyone's beating on the same drum, I guess, that's going to give you the best results for the environment that you're in with the players that you have. What about for the injury side of things to mitigate sort of more your controllable type injuries like hamstrings and calves? What have been some effective strategies that you've seen come in where maybe there's been a problem in that area, perhaps, or you're just looking to maximise players' availability?
Yeah, I guess if you're thinking about it straight from a S&C perspective, I guess injury mitigations should be intertwined in a sort of well-balanced strength program. We've used some profiling data in the past here at the TARS where we look at specific areas of potential weakness in areas of the body that might be in need of improving. So we look at calf capacity, hamstring capacity, reps to failure with body weight, neck strength, flexion extension ratios, as an example, calf strength, hamstring strength with certain isometric tests. And our medics and physios have run a profiling process in the past where we've identified gaps in each player's profiling history and their previous injury history, and then look to make improvements in those areas that they're not as good at. So we had calf club, so guys that couldn't get a 30 rep capacity on a single leg calf raise with a metronome, which is, you'd be surprised. There's a lot more of the squad that struggle with that than you might think. Even hamstring capacity, single leg bridge to failure or to try and get 30 reps, guys struggle with that. You'd also be surprised that if you do a bit of that for a few weeks and you train, you get better at it. So we looked at some areas that we just integrated into the normal training program. And when I say normal, just the daily strength program, and then additional blocks across a week that were called bulletproofing, when we looked at specific areas, particularly for rugby players, that guys needed to improve on. Most of that work is sort of integrated into main strength program, but also the physio department runs some additional sessions across the week for that too. One of the big ones for injury mitigation is just body comp. Get leaner, get fitter, get faster. Whether you're a prop, whether you're a winger. So body comp's a big focus for us in reducing skin fold. And we've got incentive-based work around that we do at the club. Guys get awards and prizes for improving in their body comp. So that's a big injury mitigation risk for us. And then work around neck, calf, ankle complex, whether it's on field, stiffness-based work, strength-based work, plyometric-based work, and then hammy, eccentric strength work. We do Nordics, we do single leg back extensions, which everyone calls a Bosch extension now, but we have a range of hammy exercises that we implement in the strength program that get stronger at it, probably going to have less injury risk. So it's basic philosophy. Train hard on those things, do stuff that works. Yeah, that's kind of what we look at.
Yep. And you mentioned the bucketing approach as well as periodizing, like as you're getting close to the season, more of a sort of speed emphasis in the weights room. What about for individuals that are strong enough, perhaps, if that is something that you look at? Do they start to periodize a bit earlier to more different specific strength qualities, whether explosive strength or some power, fast stretch? Talk us through that approach where you've obviously got a process there for the main group, but maybe a few athletes that are actually going really well in certain areas. Do you sort of shift your focus, or do they need still the main group program at that time of year? Do they still need that main group approach?
Yeah, we don't deviate a lot away from the main program. There's some rationale to that, not so much in terms of adaptation, but just what guys are doing in the gym at once. So if we've got a group of guys, we need to divvy them up in maybe groups of 4 or 5, then what those guys are doing in that group need to be pretty similar. So from a training culture perspective, a lot of the programs very similar. Some of the loading might be different, right? So I think what you may be suggesting there is if I've got some guys whose strength levels are 2.0, we got a couple, not many. Couple of the props from last year and a couple this year will be pretty close to that. And some of the lightweight backs, but they'll still train in the same main group, but they might, like you said, they might have an explosive box squat at whatever 0.7 meters a second compared to a maximal strength effort of 2-3 reps for the heavier guys. So maybe some individualization in the way that potentially some of those stronger guys express their strength and how they express what they've got. We might spend a little bit more time on that. It does stay pretty consistent across the group. And I'm sure you can appreciate when you got 50 or 60 blokes and you're individualizing programs a lot of the way, it tends to get a bit tricky. But we'll individualize some of the plyometric work that we do. So whether or not we need to focus on maybe some reactive components compared to some elastic components for different positions or different tissue type players. So players are a little bit more springy and explosive when you watch them move, or how they play on the field. We might do some more reactive work with them, quick contact times, etc. For the front row, we might spend a bit more time on elastic component. So stretch shortening cycle based, deeper squat jump, counter movement jump, etc. We've looked at how our drop jumping and our depth jumping are aligned to improvements in speed in our groups, and we found that there's been good alignment with fast guys and reactive power or reactive strength, and less fast guys with less reactivity. So, funnily enough, in rugby and across most sports, that carries true. But yeah, we delineate there a little bit. Um, but if you're asking a prop to do reactive hurdle jumps at 125 kilos, it doesn't doesn't really go that well. So there's a bit of common sense comes into it as well as thinking about tissue quality and what type of adaptation you're trying to get in the tendon or in muscle. So yeah, there's a range of thought processes there that we sort of think about when we're programming. Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic, mate. Thanks for that. Appreciate the insight and just to provide a bit of layers as well into the process and how it's evolved with different philosophies over the years as well. Long-term athlete development that you mentioned, guys that are coming in and out of the program, and you want to maximise there from a football perspective. What are some of the ways that you reduce the load if you need to, from whether it be gym or on the field?
Yeah, it's a challenging one. You need to work with the coaches effectively. We've had some young guys come into the team straight from school. There's one in particular, and he's gone straight into Super Rugby the year out from school. And we've needed to try and manage. We've needed to manage. He's had some pretty decent contact-based injuries and some injuries that you may not sort of generally pick up if you're not involved in a full-time program. So uh, it's a rough one because you're working with a coach who wants. He's good enough to play Super Rugby. He should be training at a Super Rugby standard. We all know that's not the case. If you're coming out of a school program, you just have an accrued training time. So there's a pendulum dance with a coaching staff and the medical staff on how you minimise those type of injuries for young players and how you can get the most out of them in terms of training. We literally sit down and we say what are the critical components of the week that you need this player for. And then we'll talk about, well, can we manage his load on field by sharing reps in this part of the week? Where does he need to be in the back half of the week in terms of the learning aspects to the session and the positional aspects of the session? Well, he needs to be in this session, this session, this session, but maybe the conditioning stuff he doesn't need to be in. So we might take him out of some of that work to try and minimize time on feet, the work that he's doing across the week. But maximizing what he needs to do from a team perspective, maybe not so much from a physical perspective. Flip side of that is you're trying to build training capacity in a player that doesn't have a high level training capacity coming in. So, no, Jack, that's pretty much the most challenging component of the role and of the discussions with the coaching group. And then sometimes it's just, mate, you need to get him ready to train. And so it's righto, we'll do our best as much as we can. And you're feeding extra weight sessions into them. You're feeding extra. It might be some off the deck conditioning type work because they're not good enough at that. Yeah, it's a tough one. The strategy for it varies player to player. When you've got guys coming in and out of academy, there's a grey area there too. They might be required to come and train with the senior squad, but then they've got to go back and train with the academy. So the communication level between academy staff and super staff's got to be on point. Or else you have a guy doing 5.5 Ks. That may not sound like much in terms of AFL terms, but 5.5 to 6K session for us on field's probably pretty big. So they might do that with the senior squad and then turn up for academy training in the afternoon where they're doing another 4 or 5 Ks on feet. So guys need to understand that you can't do 2 sessions like that in a week. So that may sound straightforward, but that's a challenging component. You're trying to navigate professional contact sport training volumes and intensities with players that are coming. I won't say coming from school. That means I'm having a job at school programs that are 18, 19 years old that haven't trained full time, and their bodies are 18, 19 years old, not 25 to 30. So it's a big component of rugby. The average age of a Super Rugby player has dropped the past 10 years. The average age of a Shoot Shield player, uh, Hospital Cup in Queensland, dropped as well. So you get younger guys who've had less training age coming into full-time senior footy. I'd imagine it's very similar in the AFL, not having worked in that before. But yeah, it's a rough one. Do we get it right? No, not all the time. Be interesting to talk to some other clubs or sports that may have a different approach to sort of how we go about it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's such a fine line. And like you said, it's such a challenge. There's probably no one way, like you said, because every athlete's different. Some will come in and they're super mature and they're ready to go, and it works out well. They have a ripping year in their way into the team, and off they go. And then there's others where they have significant injuries, like you said, and it's not working, and we need to make a change. So, yeah, it's a great topic to discuss. And like you said, I'm sure all clubs and all field-based sports where there's contact involved and huge demands of the game involved where they're facing the same challenge.
Yeah.
But last one, mate, on this topic before we wrap it up. I know it's been over an hour, mate, of your time, so appreciate it. But transfer, what's sort of your stance on? Do you sort of sit on the camp on let's, as physical staff, we're there to build efficiency, good competency, then capacity in terms of speed, power, strength, and then ultimately the transfer happens with playing the game, or do you feel like there's a middle spot there that we're in, that we take responsibility on in terms of transferring our capacities to the demands of the game and the sport?
Yeah, I think training's adaptation based. There's ways and strategies to improve speed, to improve strength, to improve aerobic capacity that don't involve sport specifically. So, um, in my opinion, first and foremost, if you're trying to develop a quality, you need to have an underlying understanding of how to develop that quality physiologically. Whether it's sets reps, whether it's intensity, whether it's rest periods between your efforts, whether it's the length of your effort that you need to do at a high enough intensity to elicit a lactate response, and working out how to do that across a season, across a preseason. Transference, yeah, grey area. Hey, for me, it's adaptation based, and then how you're integrating that with coaching staff, and how you're integrating that with a program. Yeah, it just comes down to philosophy and how you can best work it into a program, but getting enough time and exposure through adaptation based training, I think so, is a big challenge. If you spend too much time in work that's only sport specific, in inverted commas, you probably don't get enough opportunity to develop specific qualities. So there's got to be some specific work around quality development that doesn't involve the footy, that doesn't involve the tennis racket, etc., etc. But then you've also got to be better at your sport too. So where's that line? Yeah, it just comes down to philosophy and what you can work with a coach. Yeah.
Yeah, it actually brings on, like, how do you sort of hang your hat on in terms of things are going the way you want it to? Is it player feedback, like especially the senior players? Is it objective numbers in terms of looking at your squad progressions, or coaches' feedback in terms of, they're playing the way that we want them to be playing. All right, physically we must be pairing them well. Like, talk us through, I guess, how do you sort of measure success, I guess, in your role?
Yeah, I've always felt that you need to be able to demonstrate that you've affected change. And to affect change, you need to have appropriate tests that are measurable. Whatever quality that you're looking at, whether it's strength, speed, fitness, whatever you want to look at, you need, in my opinion, as an S&C coach, you need to be able to demonstrate that you've changed what you're designing to change. So if I want to get a guy stronger, I've got to show that he's stronger. Whatever test I'm using, whether it's a 1 rep, whatever it is, an isometric test, whatever it is, show me that you've changed something. I think that's critical. I see that teams moving better on a field, qualitative analysis of the way a team's performing. It can be positive or it can be negative, and you may have some positive adaptation that you've been able to show in the weight room or on the field, but the team might not be playing as well, or you might not have been able to change stuff in the gym or on the field in terms of speed, in terms of fitness, but your team's playing well. So I do think that quantitative change is important. I think it gives you an understanding of your training program. It gives you an understanding of if you've done too much, if you haven't done enough work. You need to be able to sit down and assess what you've done or prescribed as a coach, as an S&C, as a practitioner. Understand that you might not have done enough work. Understand that your strength program, you might not have had enough volume in it. You might not have had enough intensity in it. And then you need to test well and show that change has happened. It's important professionally. It's important for players to understand that they've improved and gotten better. It's important for coaches to understand that what you're doing in that side of the program is having a result. I think that's critical.
So, mate, thanks for getting such a good insight into over your career, but also on a specific topic in terms of how to make an influence, but also work in in the chaos of all the different opinions, like you said at the start, where everyone's probably got an opinion in this space, but to stick fat on what's important, and like you said, have that sort of stimulus adaptation approach is critical. I think there's some great tips there. I know I've got 2 pages of notes, and no doubt the listeners do as well, mate. Last 3 ones in terms of work life, pet peeves, anything that fires you up regarding industry or on the job stuff?
Oh, probably too many things, mate, to be honest. No, there's a few one of the players come up to you and say, "Oh, I'm going to do this or I'm going to do that." I say, "No, just show me what you've done. Like, don't tell me what you're going to do. Just come back, show me what you've done. Like, I don't want to know what you're going to do in the future. Like, just if you've got something you need to improve, go and do it, and then demonstrate to me that you've improved it. Show me, show other people. Don't tell me, just show me." So I guess that's one that I just try and feed back to players a little bit. There's probably a few others over my time, but probably that one comes to mind.
Yep. And favorite way to spend a day off?
Oh, it's probably just going down to the beach with the family, right? Really, just take my 2 kids and my wife down, and just sort of, she surfs a bit, so I sort of sit on the beach a bit and play the kids, and while they go off and do what they do, and that's probably the best way to spend my day off, mate, at the beach. We're lucky here. We live sort of in the middle of Sydney, in the eastern suburbs, which is quite nice. Different to Brisbane, where I'm from. Yeah.
And obviously, with the back end of the year, mate, it's halfway through of October of this recording of the podcast. What's on the horizon for the rest of the year, and what are you excited about for 2025?
Oh, I can't wait to get stuck in a preseason. New coaching group, new playing group. New staff to work with, new players to work with. It's going to be exciting leading into the Christmas break. We got a trip that we go to Japan for a couple of days and play a side over there. So I'm looking forward to that. And then next season getting stuck into the 25 season. That's the main focus professionally, I reckon, in the next block of time. Can't wait for that.
Beautiful. Awesome, mate. Yeah, plenty to be excited for. And thanks again. Really appreciate it coming on, Tim. And thanks for everyone that's tuned in live. If you tuned in halfway through or at the end there, you can watch the whole recording on our YouTube channel, and we'll post it on our podcast in the next few weeks. Our next live chat is with James Grierson, which will be 10 a.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time on the 25th of October. So I look forward to seeing you guys then. Oh, actually, Tim, I was going to say last one for those that have any follow-up questions. Best place to get in contact. If there's any
Oh,
queries.
yeah, probably just my email, I reckon, mate.
Yep.
I'll throw that to you and happy to put it on now. I
Yep.
don't
Do you want me in the show notes if you've got any follow-up questions for Tim, contact me or just add your email. You can
chuck my
contact
email
him.
in there. Yeah, throw my
Yep.
email in there. That's the best way. I don't have a social media. No, I'm no good on that. So email is probably better for me, mate.
Yeah, easy. Easy, guys. Yeah. So if you're listening in and you're maybe driving the car and listening to the recording, you'll be able to find Tim's email address in the show notes. So you can jump in there.